Terence Crawford made 8 figures in one night, yet his life outside the ring looks nothing like a superstar athlete's. The undefeated champion drives a modest car, keeps a low profile, and avoids the usual displays of wealth. But the reason behind his simple lifestyle is what makes his story fascinating. Crawford stepped into Allegiant Stadium and did something nobody thought was possible. He moved up in weight and beat Canelo Alvarez, one of the biggest names the sport has produced this generation. The payday attached to that night was massive. A smaller figure was reported for the fight against Canelo Alvarez, though Crawford confirmed the amount would be around $10 million, stating the fight was legacy-focused and gaining more money wasn't a selling point. That's a man turning down a bigger check on purpose. Most people in his position would have squeezed every last dollar out of a fight like that. He didn't. And here's where it gets strange. If you're used to how championship boxers usually behave after a career-defining win, no blowout, no new mansion announcement, no fleet of cars rolled out for the cameras, Terence Crawford drives a surprisingly cheap car despite making millions. Think about that for a second. This is a guy who just had an 8-figure payday from the Canelo Alvarez fight, and instead of parking a Bugatti in his driveway, he's still cruising around in something ordinary. He can afford a life of luxury, but he's smart about spending his money, including what car he drives. Compare that to the people around him in that exact sport, on that exact fight card. He's not a spender like Floyd Mayweather Jr., who flashes money around all the time, or Alvarez, who bought a $400,000 Godfather watch before the fight. Same ring, same night, same kind of money on the table. Totally different instinct on what to do with it. One guy's buying a watch that costs more than most houses. The other guy's driving something you'd see in a grocery store parking lot in Nebraska. Forbes went inside his finances directly, and the picture that emerges is deliberate, not accidental. Crawford has invested in the stock market and has amassed a real estate portfolio worth more than $20 million. Because, as he says, God ain't making more land. He's not hoarding cash under a mattress. He's not blowing it either. He's moving it into things that sit there and grow. Even the one area where you'd expect a fighter to indulge. Jewelry, watches, the classic athlete flex. Crawford's approach to it is almost businesslike. He insists his watch collection, which Forbes values between $500,000 and $1 million, and features pieces like a Patek Philippe Travel Time Aquanaut, an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak chronograph, and several Rolexes, is an asset bound to grow in value rather than a flashy indulgence. He's not wearing them to be seen. He's treating his own wrist like a savings account. And when Forbes asked him directly why he isn't out there spending like a typical champion, his answer wasn't about ego or restraint for its own sake. Making the money I'm making in the ring. I don't need to rush anything, he says. Some people want to rush and take risk, and I'm not a big risk taker when I can't control it. That's not a man performing humility for an interview. That's a man who's actually thought through what happens after the cameras turn off and the paydays stop coming. The clearest example of exactly how far this goes isn't even about a house or a car. It's about a t-shirt. In his merchandise business, Crawford once refused to spend an additional 99 cents to add a custom neck tag to a new line of t-shirts that cost $12 to make and sell for $40. 99 cents on a shirt that's already profitable. A man with tens of millions of dollars sitting in his accounts said no to less than $1 because it didn't make sense to him. People close to him aren't shy about naming what this is. He's frugal, says Crawford's lifelong friend Steven Nelson, the head of operations at his gym. He believes in spending money that makes sense, not cheap for the sake of being cheap. Calculated. Every dollar has to justify itself before it leaves his account. And this is where the story gets its most interesting comparison, because Crawford isn't the first person from his city to build a reputation like this. That's one thing Crawford has in common with the wealthiest resident of his native Omaha. Warren Buffett, the chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, is also famously financially prudent, living in the same house he bought in 1958 for $31,500, driving modest cars, eating at McDonald's, and using a flip phone despite his roughly $150 billion fortune. One of the richest human beings alive, living 2 zip codes away from a champion boxer, and the two of them apparently think about money the exact same way. Buffett has become a huge admirer of Crawford over the years and has attended several of his fights. So there's the hook of this whole story. a fighter who just earned life-changing money on the biggest stage in the sport, choosing to live like someone who's still worried about the light bill. Before we get into how deep this actually goes, the house, the neighborhood, the kids he's still raising in it, we need to go back and understand where this instinct even came from. Because nobody develops this kind of relationship with money by accident. To understand why a man worth tens of millions still hesitates over 99 cents, you have to go back to North Omaha, decades before any of the titles or the Netflix paydays existed. Crawford grew up in a tough Omaha neighborhood with crime and poverty all around. His father, a U.S. Navy man, was rarely home, leaving his mother Debbie to raise him mostly alone. The household wasn't stable in the way most people would want for a kid. The Crawford family frequently faced financial challenges, often struggling to afford basic necessities. That's not a detail you throw away. That's the foundation of everything that came after. A kid who watched his mother stretch every dollar just to keep the lights on and food on the table. His mother's parenting style was extreme by any modern standard. Debbie was particularly strict, often using physical punishments to discipline him, and even paying local kids to test his toughness by asking them to beat him up. Nobody ever succeeded at that, for what it's worth. But the mentality behind it, toughen him up before the world does it for you, shaped how Crawford approached everything from that point forward, money included. Looking back on it as an adult, he didn't frame it as cruelty. He framed it as preparation. That's my mom. And for her to treat me the way that she was treating me, not because she didn't love me, it's because of what she was dealt with. School wasn't a refuge either. At an early age, he was often involved in physical altercations and was kicked out of 5 different schools because of it. A kid getting bounced from school to school in a neighborhood already short on resources isn't building the kind of life where money gets treated casually later. Every dollar in that household had to work for its keep. And that lesson doesn't just disappear once the paydays get bigger. There was also grief woven into all of this. According to Heavy, Crawford's uncle Michael, his mother's brother, was murdered when Bud was a child, a trauma that gave him nightmares. That's the environment this whole financial mindset was built inside. Not abstraction, not theory. Real loss, real scarcity, real violence sitting in the background of an entire childhood. Boxing became the one place that made sense. Crawford found solace in boxing at the CW Boxing Club in North Omaha. His grandfather, father, and uncle had all trained there. It wasn't a hobby picked up on a whim. It was the family trade, in a neighborhood where very few other paths led anywhere good. Even that gym almost didn't keep him. As a teenager, Crawford clashed with his coaches at the CW Boxing Club in Omaha, and his fiery temper got him expelled. Years later, he earned his way back by competing at a family night sparring event and proving his skill. That rocky return set the tone for his career. Discipline was hard-won, but determination carried him forward. Nothing came easy. Nothing was handed to him. That's a pattern that repeats in literally every corner of his life, right up through how he handles a fight purse today. And then there's the moment that actually turned everything. Not a boxing match, a bullet. The fledgling professional boxer was sitting in his car in the early hours of the morning after a dice game in his native Omaha, Nebraska, when shots rang out and a bullet ripped through the back window and slashed his head below the ear. The bullet ricocheted off his skull, and he was lucky to escape what could have been a fatal injury. An unknown assailant shot his car 12 times, one bullet grazing his head. He didn't wait for an ambulance. Despite bleeding profusely, Crawford was able to drive himself to the hospital and survive. Just months into a professional career that hadn't even started paying off yet, he came within inches of never getting the chance to find out what he could become. He's talked about that night as the actual turning point of his life, more than any single fight. When I got shot, it changed my life tremendously and put me on the right path, Crawford told CNN. And that's when everything started happening there for me with boxing and my family and just everything. 2 months later, he was back in the ring. Crawford returned to the ring just 2 months later, defeating Michael Williams for his 5th professional win. That's the version of Crawford that existed before any of the money showed up. A kid raised on scarcity, tested by violence, who watched people around him lose everything, including their lives, over far less than what sits in his bank account now. When you understand that background, The 99 cents on a t-shirt tag stops looking strange. It starts looking like the most logical thing in the world. Now here's where the story turns, because instead of running from that neighborhood the second the money arrived, Crawford did something almost nobody in his position does. He stayed. Most athletes who escape a background like Crawford's do exactly that. Escape. They buy the gated compound 2 states away. They get a new area code. They build a life their old neighborhood can't recognize. Crawford didn't do any of that. Terence Crawford still resides in his childhood home area in Nebraska, and it's also the same place where he was born. Not a metaphor. Not a nice sentiment for an interview. He is, right now, one of the wealthiest fighters on the planet, living in the same city, the same streets where he nearly died in the back of his own car. Crawford owns a beautiful and grand mansion in his hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, where he continues to live and train. One estimate puts the main residence at a $1.5 million home in Omaha, where Crawford lives with his family and spends most of his time when he's not training or competing. By the standard of a man who's made tens of millions of dollars, that's not a flex. That's a starter home for someone in his tax bracket. He didn't stop at one property in the city either, but the pattern holds. Crawford owns a second home in Omaha, valued at approximately $2.3 million, believed to be a larger, more luxurious home that Crawford may use for entertaining or as an investment. Even his upgrade is modest by the standards of championship-level athletes. There's a piece of the old neighborhood that belongs to him in spirit, even though it isn't technically his. Crawford's childhood home, where he grew up in North Omaha, still holds a special place in his heart. And while he doesn't own it, a portion of the street it's on was renamed Terence Bud Crawford Street in his honor in 2018. You don't get a street named after you in a place you're trying to leave behind. Outside of Nebraska, his real estate footprint stays remarkably restrained for someone with his earnings. Crawford also owns a property in Colorado Springs, which is 390 miles away from his hometown Nebraska. One extra house, not a European villa, not a Miami penthouse, not a ski chalet, a second American city, a few states over, and that's about it. His neighbors will tell you this isn't performance for the cameras either. A woman living near him described exactly what it's like to actually be in his orbit day to day. Crawford may be Omaha's champion, but Gournay Wells said he's also her neighbor. He's humble. You can see him at the local park, the grocery store, and he's going to stop and speak. Wells said, "That's not a press release. That's someone describing running into a world champion at the grocery store like it's nothing unusual, because in Omaha, apparently it isn't, and the community connection goes past just staying in the area." Even as he's risen through the boxing ranks, Crawford still lives in Omaha and gives back to his community through B&B Sports Academy, the boxing gym he co-founded to mentor kids like himself. He didn't just keep his address in the old neighborhood. He built an institution there, aimed squarely at kids living the exact life he lived. The gym isn't a photo op either. He shows up. Those kids see how Crawford's work pays off with unprecedented championships. When he returned to Omaha a few days after his historic win, Crawford said everyone at the gym was working hard as usual, and he took his place training right next to the kids. After beating one of the biggest names in the sport on the same week, he's back in a gym in North Omaha, sweating next to teenagers who probably remind him of himself 20 years ago. Even people who've watched him for years and covered every era of his career describe the same through line. Despite attaining such huge success, Crawford remains attached to his roots. He, along with his family, lives in Nebraska, the same place he was born. The wealth changed, the zip code didn't. This is the piece of the story that most people flat out miss when they think about championship-level athletes. They assume money always buys distance, a bigger house, a further commute from where you came from, a life insulated from the place that made you. Crawford went the other direction. He kept the address. He kept the gym. He kept the neighbors who watched him grow up and who now watch him walk through the same grocery store aisles they do. But staying close to home is only half of what makes this story unusual. The other half is who's actually living in that house with him, because the family side of Crawford's life is just as understated as everything else. For a man this famous, Crawford keeps an almost total lid on the people he comes home to every night. And what little does leak out paints a picture that matches everything else about him. Talking about Terence Crawford's personal life, he is currently in a relationship with Linda Person, and the couple has been dating since the early 2000s but haven't married yet. 2 decades together, no wedding, no public ceremony, no headline moment. Just a relationship that's outlasted almost every trend in his sport, quietly, off camera. Together they've built a full household. The couple has 6 children, including 3 daughters and 3 sons. 6 kids. That's not a small family by any measure, and it's not one that gets paraded in front of cameras either. Crawford doesn't put his children at the center of endorsement deals or turn them into content. They exist in the background of a life that's already private by design. That house full of kids lives inside the same modest property we already walked through. Not a separate estate, not staff quarters, not a compound. Crawford lives with his longtime partner, Linda Person, and 6 kids, 3 sons and 3 daughters. And despite attaining such huge success, Crawford remains attached to his roots, living in Nebraska, the same place he was born. Same street, same neighborhood his neighbors described running into him at the park. The physical footprint of raising 6 kids, while being a world champion, still doesn't tip over into anything excessive. The backyard likely includes play areas for the children and possibly a pool, though Crawford has kept specific details about his property private. Even the descriptions of his home life come filtered through likely and possibly, because he simply doesn't hand that information out. Compare that to athletes who give magazines full walkthroughs of their homes, room by room. Crawford treats his family's physical space the way he treats his money, tightly controlled, rarely shown, and none of anyone's business unless he decides otherwise. What we do know about the house itself backs up that same restraint. Terence "Bud" Crawford may be a boxing superstar, but when it comes to his home life, he keeps things surprisingly down to earth. His $1.5 million house in Omaha, Nebraska, is a testament to his roots and his commitment to family and community. And it's not the flashiest celebrity home out there. Not flashy. Repeated word, repeated theme from multiple outlets that went looking for the opposite story and kept finding the same answer. Even the training setup built into the property serves the family more than it serves any image of luxury. Crawford's training facility at home likely includes heavy bags, speed bags, a ring or training area, weights, and cardio equipment, allowing him to work out at any time without leaving his property, with the gym probably occupying a significant portion of the house. That's not a trophy room built for guests. That's a practical setup, so a father of 6 doesn't have to choose between training for a world title and being home for dinner. There's one moment where the private side of his life collided violently with the public one, and it says a lot about what he actually keeps inside those walls. In 2023, $317,000 worth of jewelry, gold chains, a gold necklace, 2 watches, and a bracelet set was stolen from his home, and that was just the stolen jewelry, with his full collection likely holding more pieces than what was taken. Even after being robbed of over $300,000 in valuables, there was no public meltdown, no dramatic social media response, no interviews about the break-in circulating for weeks. It happened, it got reported, and life at the house kept moving. That incident actually undercuts the idea that any of this modesty is an act. Nobody stages a burglary to prove a point. Crawford had genuine wealth sitting inside that home, enough that thieves targeted it specifically, and the response afterward was the same low-key posture he brings to everything else. Even the trips away from home follow the same understated pattern. Crawford enjoys taking time off of work too. He traveled to Thailand, as he shared on Instagram. Not a chartered super yacht through the Mediterranean, not a private island. A trip shared briefly, then back to Omaha, back to the gym, back to the 6 kids, and the partner he's never rushed to the altar with despite over 20 years together. Put all of that together, and you get a family life that mirrors the financial one piece for piece. No performance. No public displays built for engagement. A 6-person household anchored in the same neighborhood he grew up fighting to survive in, protected from the same cameras that made him rich in the first place. And that consistency, the same restraint showing up in his house, his cars, his relationship, his kids, is exactly what makes the final piece of this story land the way it does. Because when you add up everything he's earned against everything he actually owns, the gap is enormous and it's entirely on purpose. Start with what he's actually made. Crawford has earned approximately $61 million through his boxing career, and that's before factoring in the Canelo payday that pushed his total even higher, reportedly earning $10 million from beating Canelo Alvarez. Took his lifetime earnings up towards $71 million. Multiple outlets have landed on different snapshots of his current net worth, with figures generally clustering in the range that reflects what he's kept and reinvested rather than simply what's crossed his palm. As of 2026, Crawford's net worth is most commonly estimated in the $20 million to $30 million range, with many current references clustering near the top end of that range around $30 million. That gap between total earnings and net worth isn't a red flag. It's not mismanagement. It's the opposite. It's taxes, training camp costs, management fees, and a whole lot of that money getting parked in appreciating assets instead of getting spent. Net worth isn't the same as career earnings. It's a snapshot of assets minus liabilities. What's been accumulated after taxes, training camp costs, management and legal fees, lifestyle spending and investing. Because a fighter can make enormous money on a few nights. But net worth reflects what they keep and build over time. And Crawford has been remarkably transparent about exactly where his money actually goes once it lands in his account. It's not sneakers, it's not chains, it's land and stock and appreciating assets. Guy ain't making no more land. His house in Omaha remains his primary, but he also has a property in Colorado Springs and several more properties across Missouri, Colorado, and Nebraska. That's the actual secret. Not a hidden mansion. Not a garage full of hypercars nobody's seen. A quiet real estate portfolio spread across the Midwest, built the same unglamorous way anyone builds long-term wealth. Buy, hold, wait. His car situation reflects the same math. He's not driving a beat-up sedan. To be clear, there's real money in that garage. Crawford owns a Mercedes-AMG G63, worth $145,000, among other cars in his collection that include a Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat, a GMC Sierra, and a Hummer H2. But stack that against the earning power of an 8-figure fighter, and it's practically restrained. Even outlets that specifically went looking for a flashy angle on his garage came back with the same conclusion. Terence Crawford doesn't really like flaunting his wealth, and despite multiple 7-figure purses since at least 2016 plus the Spence PPV revenue, he's reportedly worth between $20 and $25 million. Even the one indulgence he allows himself doesn't behave like an indulgence. Bud does seemingly like to splurge on jewelry, but other than that, Crawford doesn't seem to be a big spender. At least one doesn't see it much on his social media. No yacht photos. No private jet flexes. No champagne-soaked celebration videos after a fight that just paid him 8 figures. If you only followed his social media, you'd have no idea he was one of the highest-paid athletes on the planet. This is a man who fought his way out of a childhood built on scarcity, survived a bullet that should have ended everything before it started, and came out the other side with more money than almost anyone from his neighborhood will ever see. And instead of using that money to separate himself from where he came from, he used it to plant himself deeper into it. The gym he grew up training at, the street renamed in his honor, the house down the road from the grocery store where his neighbor still runs into him buying groceries like anybody else. Warren Buffett didn't become a fan of Crawford by accident, and it isn't really about boxing. It's because the two of them, from the exact same city, arrived at the exact same conclusion about money from two completely different starting points. One from generational business success, the other from a childhood where the lights sometimes didn't stay on. Buffett drives an ordinary car and eats fast food, despite a fortune measured in the hundreds of billions. Crawford drives something similarly unremarkable despite a fortune that, relative to his industry, puts him near the very top of what a boxer can earn. The people who expected a champion boxer to show up with a chain worth more than a house, a driveway full of supercars, and a mansion built for magazine spreads, got a different story entirely. They got a man who still trains next to teenagers in a North Omaha gym, still lives a short drive from the street where he nearly died, still hasn't married the woman he's raised 6 kids with over 2 decades, and still won't spend an extra 99 cents on a shirt tag if the math doesn't add up. That's the version of Terence Crawford that never makes it onto a highlight reel. Not because it's hidden by choice, exactly, but because it's simply not loud enough to compete with the knockouts. The undefeated record gets the cameras. The quiet, deliberate, almost stubborn relationship with money, built by a childhood most people would never recover from, is the part of his life he actually seems to want to protect. Sources: Forbes, Inside Terence Crawford's Knockout Year. Sports Illustrated. Terence Crawford drives surprisingly cheap car despite making millions. Sports Tiger. Terence Crawford net worth. Essentially Sports. Terence Crawford's lavish lifestyle. House, cars, and more. Essentially Sports. Terence Crawford's $360,000 car collection. Essentially Sports. What is Terence Crawford's net worth in 2025? Nebraska Public Media. Omaha celebrates Terence "Bud" Crawford as its boxing champion. Humble neighbor. Home decor today. $1.5 million Terence Crawford house in Omaha, Nebraska. This older house. $3 million Terence Crawford house in Omaha, Nebraska. CNN. Terence Crawford. Hit by a bullet. U.S. boxer vowed to change his life. Yahoo Sports. Terence Crawford shooting details. Prep Network. Before the Belts. A look back at Terence Crawford's youth career. Essentially Sports. Terence Crawford's ethnicity, hometown, and origins. Revolt. Terence "Bud" Crawford. 13 fun facts about the boxing icon. Wikipedia. Terence Crawford. Jenny Orchard. Terence Crawford net worth in 2026.